Hi everyone, and welcome to video number 11 on Elizabethan England. And video number 11 is all about this, the Throckmorton Plot, 1583. If you remember last video, I was talking about the three Catholic plots, RTB 1, 2, 3, and video 10 we looked at the Ridolfi plot, 1571. Well, now it's time to look at this one, the Throckmorton Plot. Plot number 2 against Queen Elizabeth. Now, what was their plan? Was it different to Ridolfi? Was it the same? Let's have a little look and then you can compare. The plan. A French army was to invade England, led by the Duke of Guise. Now, if you remember, Mary Queen of Scots' mother was Mary of Guise. So the Duke of Guise would be Mary's cousin. So it seems as if the French are getting involved here against England. And the plot was simple. The French army would invade, remove or kill Elizabeth, replace Elizabeth with Mary Queen of Scots, and then restore the Catholic religion to England. So that was the plot. That was the aim. Now, the French army, of course, would have support, financial support, from Philip II of Spain and the Pope. So here's a new thing. In the past, France and Spain had been enemies. But now it seems as if France and Spain are getting closer together. I'll come back to that at the end of this video. So, France invade with Spanish and papal support. Now, the plot was called the Throckmorton Plot. Well, what's that all about? Well, a young Catholic called Francis Throckmorton. He acted as the go-between, almost like the postman. And what he did was he brought letters from Mary Queen of Scots and the Catholic plotters to the French and the Spanish ambassadors. So he was sort of liaising between the two groups. Now, here's a new name for you. Don't worry, because I'll do a video totally dedicated to him in a couple of videos' time. And the new name for you is Francis Walsingham. And he was sort of Secretary of State for Elizabeth, an advisor. He helped Elizabeth. And his speciality was he was almost like the chief spy or the spy master. Now, when the Throckmorton plot was going on, Francis Walsingham knew all about it. He found out about the plot. But he didn't arrest Throckmorton straight away. No, he just kept everybody under surveillance, checking out and trying to find out more and more about who was involved. November 1583, not 1983, come on. November 1583, Francis Throckmorton was arrested. Torture was inevitable. His house was searched. At his house they found other papers, incriminating papers, which implicated several Catholic nobles. Say, look, they're involved in the plot. We've got names, we've got addresses. This is what Walsingham wanted. He wanted the detail, he wanted the evidence. The papers also contained details of possible harbours for the French ships to land, bringing the French army across. As I said, Throckmorton was tortured and he admitted it all under torture. Well, who wouldn't? Torture's a terrible thing. But one thing Throckmorton did say, he said this. He said, look, the plot, it's not really very advanced because we haven't got the money from Philip II of Spain. There's been no money. So France and Spain were getting closer together, but at that time, Philip was not providing the money yet for France. But Walsingham has got papers. Walsingham has got letters. Walsingham has got evidence. Frustratingly, though, for Francis Walsingham, the evidence about Mary Queen of Scots and her guilt was a little bit unclear. It was a little bit hazy. It was a little bit inconclusive. So he couldn't actually say to Elizabeth, look, there's the evidence. Your cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, is plotting against you. Here is the concrete evidence. He did not have that yet. Watch this space. So that was the Throckmorton plot. Now, in the exam, they might say 2 key features. We could mention about France and Spain getting involved. You could mention about the French Duke of Guise. You could mention about Throckmorton carrying the letters to the Spanish and the French ambassadors and saying what the planning was like. Or, sometimes they would say, explain why the Throckmorton plot was a threat to Elizabeth. Well, they're plotting to overthrow her. They're plotting to assassinate her. They're plotting to replace her with Mary, Queen of Scots. They're plotting to restore Catholicism. There's 4 threats straight away. And now that I'm going to talk in the final part of the video about the significance, the consequences of the plot, and you can get some more idea about what sort of threat the plot was. Now, the first thing, of course, for poor old Francis Throckmorton, he had an appointment. Hanged, drawn, quartered, the axe, chopping off parts, not very good. Executed at Tyburn in 1584. That's the first consequence. Second one, the Spanish ambassador representing Spain's interests here in England. The Spanish ambassador was expelled, kicked out of the country, a man called Mendoza. Now, what does that tell you about the relationships between England and Spain? Getting worse. What would Philip do to react to his ambassador being sent back? So there's something to think about. Relations between England and Spain. Don't worry, there's a video coming on that very, very soon. Remember I said Walsingham searched Throckmorton's house and found papers? Well, 2 top Catholic nobles were named in the papers. So they were arrested. One man called Howard. He was later released. And then another man called Percy. Percy, where have we seen him before? Yes, Revolt of the Northern Earls. Thomas Percy, do you remember? Earl of Northumberland. Well, this Percy was the Revolt of the Northern Earl's brother. He was arrested, kept in the Tower of London. Things were not looking very good for him. I wonder what will happen. Actually, he dodged the axe because he committed suicide in the Tower. Just imagine how bad things must have been. But notice again, Catholic nobles implicated in the plot. Now, as I've said, there wasn't enough evidence to execute Mary, Queen of Scots. But the Protestants are becoming very, very suspicious of the Catholics, and they're very, very suspicious of Mary, Queen of Scots. It led to an increasing feeling against Catholics in the country. People were beginning to say, these Catholics, they're like, in brackets, the enemy within. We can't trust them. They're all potential traitors. 1583. Think how far we've come from Elizabeth's religious settlement, 1559, when they made compromises and concessions to the Catholics. Now the Catholics were regarded as the enemy within. People were very, very suspicious of them. So much so that quite a few Catholics, many Catholics, left England. Some top Catholics who remained were imprisoned. There was up to 10,000 or so either put in prison or kept under surveillance by Walsingham and his network of spies. The situation in England is changing. So much so that in 1585 there is a new law, a new Act of Parliament, and it said this: if you are found either helping or sheltering a Catholic priest, remember I said the Jesuit priests came across to say the Catholic Mass in secret in homes. If you were sheltering a priest or helping him in any way, the penalty for that, death. So there's a ratcheting up of laws. It's getting more severe, more harsh treatment of the Catholics. Now, they also introduced something called a bond of association. Now, what's that all about? Well, it was quite simple. It was aimed to prevent further plots. The Protestants were worried about the plotting against their queen. So they introduced this bond of association. All nobles had to sign it. And it's an act of signing, an act of loyalty to Queen Elizabeth. And they also agreed by signing the bond that they would execute anyone planning to overthrow Elizabeth. Relations between Elizabeth and the Catholics was getting worse at this time. Now, remember Walsingham. He was a little bit annoyed he didn't get the evidence against Mary Queen of Scots. But it made him more determined. He was determined to seek and find evidence to prove finally, beyond all doubt, conclusively, that Mary Queen of Scots was involved in the plotting. These were all consequences of the Throckmorton Plot. And the final one, fear. Fear stalked England, Protestant England, looking across to Europe, Catholic France, Catholic Spain. Now, in the past, those two countries had been enemies. But now it seems as if they are getting closer together. Remember, French army, Duke of Guise, allegedly paid for with Spanish money. If France and Spain continue to get closer together, combine their powers, unite against Protestant England, that would be a very, very serious and severe threat. And the Throckmorton Plot seemed to suggest that that was happening. And that's why probably it was a bigger threat than the Ridolfi Plot. So there we have the Throckmorton Plot, another challenge to Elizabeth and the Protestant religion. Plot number 2, 1583. I've introduced this new character, Walsingham. He's desperate to prove that Mary Queen of Scots is involved. Plot number 2. I wonder what will happen in plot number 3. Can he finally get his definite proof? Well, you'll have to wait until the next video, because in that video I will discuss plot number 3. I hope it's been useful for you. The Throckmorton Plot. Speak to you soon. All the best now.